Welcome back to the deep dive. We are tackling something today that is, frankly, audacious.
Audacious is a good word for it.
We have this stack of source material, the Red Frequency Files research document, and it's not just a small claim.
hmm
It fundamentally challenges how we think about, well, stress, disorder, chaos itself.
It really does. It moves the whole conversation away from chaos being just, randomness or entropy.
Hmm.
Instead, it treats it as a specific, measurable state, a phenomenon you can actually detect and track in your own body.
And the central claim, the one we're really going to dig into today, is this idea that chaos is the transitional state between two coherent realities.
Exactly. It's not a void, it's static. It's the noise you hear when you're trying to tune into two different radio stations at the exact same time.
That framing it's instantly clarifying. Because if chaos is a gap, a bridge between reality A and reality B,
Then it's not some inevitable force of nature.
right, it becomes a choice, a position you're in.
Yeah.
So our mission today is to really dissect the mechanics of that position. We're going to use frequency, neuroscience, physics.
And hard data points, things like heart rate variability, HRV, and EEG brainwave tracking. The goal, really, is to give you a clear pathway to what the document calls sovereignty over your internal state.
Okay, so to understand the gap, we first have to define the two poles it sits between.
That's right. So on one side, you have the coherent state.
Hmm.
This is your desired reality. The document describes it with some really specific physiological markers.
Like the heart and brain being synchronized.
Exactly. Your nervous system is regulated. Your internal frequency is tuned to your intention. That's one pole. And on the other side, you have the externally imposed state.
The reality being broadcast at you, the collective narrative, the survival frequency.
And here's the really provocative finding, the thing that sets the stage for this whole discussion.
Yeah.
The document states very clearly that this chaotic gap, it's not some occasional thing you dip into.
Right.
It says the gap is where most people live.
Wow.
They're not in chaos because they're fundamentally random people. They're in chaos because they are constantly oscillating. They're being pulled back and forth between what they want and the overwhelming external broadcasts.
So we're going to walk through the physics of that, how it drains your energy, how it stops your body from repairing itself, and how it basically prevents you from manifesting anything stable.
If you've ever wondered why your best intentions, your morning meditation, just seems to collapse the moment you step out the door.
This is why. This deep dive explains the measurable physical mechanism behind that exact experience.
Let's get into it.
All right, let's start with that ideal state internal coherence. The red frequency files identify this as the foundation, the non-negotiable starting point for building any desired reality. So what are the markers, the measurable physical signs that someone is actually in that state?
What's so fascinating here is how the document just strips away all the metaphorical language. When they say internal coherence, they mean a very real, measurable physiological alignment. And
Okay.
the key marker is synchronized activity between the heart and the brain. And this is often quantified by achieving high levels of what's called heart rate variability, or HRV.
Okay, let's pause on that because the word variability can be really confusing. I think when people hear that, especially with health metrics, they think stable is good. Low variability, like a steady metronome-like heart rate. What does high HRV actually mean here?
That's a crucial distinction, and honestly, it's a point where a lot of the science can trip people up. High HRV means there's a high variability in the time interval between your individual heartbeats.
So it's irregular.
It's adaptively irregular. A heart with highly variable timing is a resilient, adaptive heart. It means your nervous system can switch gears really, really fast. It can go from fight or flight, the sympathetic state, to rest and digest, the parasympathetic state, on a dime.
I see.
So when the red frequency files talk about high coherence, they mean your system is highly adaptive. It's not rigid. Other markers would be brainwave states dominated by calm alpha and deep theta waves, the kind that help with creativity and learning, and a nervous system that's just solidly rooted in that parasympathetic rest and digest mode.
So it's not really about just feeling calm. It's about having the biological ability to handle anything without crashing.
Exactly, without
Yeah.
crashing. And the moment that alignment is disrupted by an external frequency,
A stressful email, a loud argument.
an alarming news headline, you instantly enter the gap.
Right. The external input forces your adaptive capacity to just collapse.
Precisely. And that brings us right to their definition of the chaotic state. It's that transitional place where you are neither fully anchored in your intended reality nor fully stabilized in the one being imposed on you.
Yeah.
It is the definition of unstable middle ground.
The source gives this incredibly concise formula. It just says
Chaos.
the gap between the reality you're trying to create and the reality being imposed on you,
Mhm.
which implies that the chaos isn't the reality itself. It's the oscillation. It's the bouncing between them.
And this is so vital for understanding the true cost of modern life. The document identifies this state as just, profoundly energy intensive,
Yeah.
and directionless.
How so?
Imagine you're trying to build a brick wall, but someone is constantly pushing you from the left and then from the right. All your energy, all your metabolic fuel is spent just trying to stay upright. You're not making any progress building the wall.
You're just stabilizing.
You're just stabilizing. And this perpetual state of oscillation means your nervous system is burning immense fuel, leading directly to chronic stress, to anxiety, to that feeling that you're constantly braced for a fight that never actually comes.
Which brings us to the foundational law that sort of dictates this whole battlefield. The document calls it non-negotiable.
Yes. You cannot hold two frequencies simultaneously.
It sounds so simple, but the implications are.
Yeah.
They're staggering.
The mechanism they describe is called the overwrite. So
Yeah.
if you're broadcasting your internal frequency of, say, calm and clarity, but then you expose yourself to an external frequency that's stronger,
And what defines stronger?
louder, more persistent, more emotionally charged, that external frequency will, by default, overwrite your internal one. It's a fundamental principle of physics. The dominant signal demands entrainment, resonance.
And this is where we really move from philosophy into hard science, which I know is critical for our listeners.
Yeah.
The source really hammers this point.
Yeah.
This isn't a metaphor.
Not at all. It's measurable. When that override happens, the change is instant and it's detectable. If you're hooked up to an HRV monitor, you literally see the variability number plummet.
And on an EEG.
Your brainwave states shift immediately from those calm alpha and theta waves to high-frequency beta and gamma waves. That's the signature of hypervigilance. A galvanic skin response device will track the spike in arousal. The shift from coherence to chaos is not a subjective feeling. It is a verified physiological collapse of your internal alignment because of an external input.
Okay, so let's unpack this concept of frequency warfare. The red frequency files don't just say we're randomly stressed. They argue we are under a constant, coordinated, almost targeted frequency attack. And it's designed to keep us unstable, to keep us in that chaos gap.
The document is incredibly specific here. It identifies 5 primary vectors of attack. These are the main conduits through which that external reality tries to force entrainment and pull us into the gap.
The first one is probably the most obvious: mainstream media. The source claims news cycles are specifically engineered for maximum cortisol spikes.
They actually analyze the engineering of the narrative arc. They argue that the media knows that ambiguity, moral outrage, and the feeling of imminent threat are the fastest ways to light up the amygdala, the brain's fear center.
So by delivering information through a lens of existential dread,
You're guaranteed to get an instant jump into sympathetic activation. It is, according to this research, a deliberate targeted input designed to raise your survival frequency.
vector number 2 is the digital environment we all live in. Social media algorithms. We already know the basic mechanism here rewards volatility, right?
That's right. Outrage equals engagement. Engagement equals advertising revenue. The algorithm in this model acts as a chaos amplifier. It actively seeks out and promotes content with the highest emotional charge, which is usually negative, divisive, or volatile, because that kind of input is the most effective at locking your attention and keeping your nervous system oscillating right there in the gap.
The third vector is an interesting one: music frequencies. The source does acknowledge the whole 440 hertz versus 432 hertz debate.
The idea that the standard 440 hertz tuning is subtly dissonant or agitating to the nervous system.
Right, but it stresses that the most immediate vector of emotional frequency disruption from music is actually the lyrical content.
Think about it. If you're absorbing a 3-minute intensely emotional narrative about betrayal, loss, or rage, your emotional and physiological state will rapidly begin to mirror that input. Music is a direct pipeline to the limbic system. It bypasses the rational mind. A powerful melody combined with sorrowful lyrics is basically a guaranteed frequency overwrite.
Vector 4 is a more constant background assault: environmental noise pollution. The document just calls it urban frequency chaos.
Our nervous systems are wired to constantly monitor our environment for threats. So the constant drone of traffic, sirens, sudden loud bangs from construction, these inputs keep the sympathetic nervous system perpetually primed for danger.
They prevent you from ever achieving true, deep relaxation.
Exactly. It makes achieving internal coherence difficult and maintaining it almost impossible.
And finally, Vector 5, which is highly relatable but I think often misunderstood. Interpersonal energy vampires. Everyone knows the term, but the document gives it a very technical, very specific definition.
It's defined as unregulated nervous systems seeking regulation through you.
So it's not necessarily malicious.
Not at all. It's a biological drive. When a person is operating from a state of intense dysregulation, low HRV, high beta waves, their system unconsciously tries to achieve co-regulation by lashing onto a stable system nearby. They essentially dump their chaos into your field, seeking stability, and in doing that, they drain your coherence. They pull you right into the gap with them.
And that sets up this whole mechanism of the frequency mismatch. So let's detail that physiological shift, the one caused by all this disruptive input.
Okay, so in the desired coherent state, we've got high HRV, parasympathetic dominance, those calm alpha and theta brainwaves. That's the physiological state of rest, repair, and optimal function.
But then one of these 5 vectors hits you, and it forces an immediate massive shift.
The instant that input hits your limbic system, you see sympathetic nervous system activation. You get a measurable flood of cortisol and adrenaline into your bloodstream. Your brainwaves spike into beta and gamma.
Which are the signatures of focus, but also hypervigilance and anxiety.
Exactly. And that resulting frequency mismatch between your intended calm state and what the external environment is demanding of you, that is the exact entry point into the chaos gap. Your body gets 2 conflicting instructions at once. One signal says, be peaceful and create, and a much louder signal is screaming, run, or you will die.
So now we get to the core of what the document calls the manifestation paradox. So many people dedicate time and energy to establishing coherence, meditation, visualization, but that feeling, that state, just seems to collapse instantly. The research offers a pretty visceral analogy for this.
It does. It's titled, Why Your Morning Meditation Doesn't Survive Your Commute.
Right.
And it lays out what they call the standard manifestation protocol. An individual starts their day, they achieve a measurable state of coherence through their morning routine. Maybe it's 20 minutes of meditation, a heart math session where they get a high coherence score, they're doing their affirmations, they feel aligned. They are, for a moment, vibrating at their desired frequency.
And then the rapid disruption timeline begins. They get in the car, switch on the news radio, and are immediately hit with stories of economic collapse and political scandal.
Then they check their phone at a red light and see social media outrage. Then they hit an unexpected traffic jam, leading to that instantaneous cortisol spike, maybe some road rage. Then they walk into the office, and the first person they see is a coworker venting about a crisis.
And the document calculated a really startling figure here. I think we need to elaborate on this because the sheer speed of the override is, well, it's terrifying.
The research suggests by measuring the instantaneous microshifts in HRV and EEG responses to these very common daily stimuli, they can assert that. By 10 a.m., your frequency has been overwritten 47 times.
Okay, wait, 47 times. That sounds less like a specific calculation and more like a scare tactic. How does the research even arrive at that number? What is the methodology behind detecting an overwrite?
That's a very fair and necessary question. The number 47 isn't arbitrary. The document explains it's a documented behavioral average. It's derived from studies tracking subject responses to controlled stimuli over a 2-hour morning period.
And how do they define an overwrite?
An overwrite is defined as any measurable drop in HRV coherence of 2.0 or more, or a sustained shift from alpha-theta brainwaves to high beta that lasts for more than 15 seconds.
So give me an example.
Okay, a single news headline that triggers a fear response, that's one. An unexpected aggressive interaction with another driver, that's another. Even just checking 10 social media posts that trigger outrage or comparison. Each one registers as a distinct frequency shift that demands immediate energy for your system to re-regulate.
So the sum of all those tiny little micro shifts is what averages out to 47 for the typical urban professional who's consuming constant media.
Correct. Which makes the collapse of coherence almost inevitable. You aren't fully present in your desired reality anymore, but you have just enough lingering awareness to feel the intense pain of the chaos. And that rapid, energy-sapping oscillation is the opening of the gap.
So moving to the deeper critique in the document, it asserts that mainstream media is fundamentally in the attention extraction business, not the information business.
Right. And attention, as we've established, follows frequency. If they allow you to remain stable and coherent, your attention will naturally move toward productive internal creation, not external consumption.
That's a powerful claim. It argues the entire system is designed to keep you unstable. And the simple formula the document provides for engineering this collective chaos is, well, it's disturbingly effective.
The process starts, they say, by identifying the baseline human frequency. We naturally seek curiosity, connection, safety. The next step is to deliberately disrupt that frequency with a strong, immediate, fear-inducing stimulus that pulls your attention away from whatever internal task you were focused on.
Then you offer a solution or a clarification that is only partially delivered. The classic, tune in tomorrow, or click here for the hidden truth.
Right, it requires continued attention, and the final step is to just repeat that cycle every single day until a dependency forms.
The result of that formula, according to the research, is chronic low-grade fight-or-flight activation. It's an addiction to the cortisol dopamine cycle that gives you a false sense of being informed and a drastically narrowed perception of reality that focuses only on immediate survival threats. It makes long-term planning almost impossible.
To illustrate this, the red frequency files perform some detailed analysis of common media narratives. It demonstrates how this pattern repeats across different topics to generate specific emotional frequencies, all to ensure we stay in that gap.
And here's where it gets really interesting, because these patterns are so familiar to all of us. Let's look at the three primary examples detailed in the research. And we should be clear, we're just reporting impartially on the analysis contained in the source material.
Absolutely. The first narrative it analyzes is the climate change narrative.
Okay.
The structural components are highly specific. It begins with intense fear, a headline, like, "We only have 10 years left to save the planet." This is immediately paired with personal guilt. You, the consumer, are personally responsible for this disaster.
And then comes the paradox.
Exactly. It's coupled with learned helplessness, but also your personal actions are too small to matter. You are powerless to stop the industrial complex. The result, according to the document, is a state of chronic, paralyzing anxiety, and that anxiety drives the continued consumption of the very content that's causing the distress.
The second example is the political division narrative. The analysis here says this is pure tribal activation and existential threat.
The formula it identifies uses the assertion that the other side is evil, which frames any political opponent as an existential threat. Our democracy is ending. Then it applies urgency without clarity. You must act now, but it never tells you exactly what effective action to take.
And the result of that?
Constant vigilance, a measurable cortisol addiction. The document argues that individuals become so dependent on the cycle of outrage that they lose the ability to regulate their internal state outside of that political drama. The world becomes entirely black and white, which amplifies those high beta brainwaves.
And the third, which probably hits closer to home for most people, is the economic doom narrative. This one really targets the scarcity mindset and financial survival.
Right. This narrative uses the fear of recession is coming, ties it to a direct survival threat. Inflation will wipe out your savings, and then backs it all up with authority-backed fear. All the leading experts predict a total collapse.
And this cycle generates what? Scarcity consciousness.
Scarcity consciousness, fear-based decisions like hoarding or just complete paralysis, and a systemic inability to even imagine future abundance because the frequency being consistently broadcast is one of imminent loss and survival. The conclusion of the research is that this repeatable pattern across all platforms is a form of frequency warfare designed to maintain collective instability.
Okay, so we've established that this chaotic gap is a state of perpetual oscillation. It's caused by these conflicting external and internal frequencies. Now let's bring in the neuroscience to explain the measurable biological cost of living there. What does that rapid oscillation actually do to the physical nervous system?
The key term here is dysregulation. That rapid oscillation prevents the nervous system from ever establishing a stable baseline. It's like you're constantly being forced to rev the engine and then slam on the brakes. You can never fully commit to repair, to rest, or to intentional creation.
So let's dedicate some time to contrasting the physiological markers of the three states in detail, just so our listener understands the exact biological cost. We know the coherent state is high HRV, alpha, and theta brainwaves.
And critically, in that coherent state, the prefrontal cortex, or PFC, is fully online.
Which is our executive function center.
It's the home of executive function, impulse control, long-term planning, nuanced social behavior. The hippocampus, which is responsible for memory consolidation and learning, is also highly active. This is the biological state of intentional living.
Okay, so then we have the chaos state, the gap, which sounds like the worst of both worlds.
It is. You have sympathetic activation, but there's no resolution. You're constantly in preparation mode, constantly vigilant. HRV drops because the system is rigidly focused on survival. Brain waves spike to high beta and gamma, which gives you intense but very shallow focus hypervigilance.
And what's happening with the brain's command center?
The amygdala, the brain's fear center, hijacks the response, and crucially, the PFC goes offline.
When you say the PFC goes offline, what does that actually mean for someone's daily life? How does that show up in the chaos gap?
It means they lose the ability to think rationally or long-term. They become purely reactive. Impulse control vanishes, which is why people in the gap are so prone to emotional spending or sudden emotional outbursts or immediate consumption of destructive input like doom scrolling or binge watching.
Because the limbic system is driving the bus.
The limbic system is driving the bus. You're being driven by primal fear and the need for immediate reward, not by your stated goals or your values.
And what about the extreme end of the spectrum? The state where the external reality just completely dominates, the imposed reality dominance state.
That's the full sympathetic lock, a state of sustained low frequency. HRV collapses even further, hitting a rigid survival baseline. The brain becomes beta wave locked. You're alert, but you're paralyzed, incapable of creative problem solving or seeing nuance. The limbic system is running the entire show, and behavior becomes purely reactive. This often manifests as depression, despair, or intense political tribalism. The individual has, for all intents and purposes, adapted to the frequency being broadcast at them.
The document is very clear on why the gap, that middle state, is the most energy-intensive and dangerous one.
It's the cost of perpetual conflict. You are burning massive amounts of metabolic energy trying to satisfy two conflicting demands. Your body is producing cortisol and adrenaline to initiate fight or flight, but because you're stuck oscillating, you can't fight a news headline, you can't run away from a traffic jam, that chemical cocktail has no behavioral resolution.
So the energy just sits there.
That unreleased energy and constant chemical signaling leads directly to adrenal fatigue, chronic inflammation, and that pervasive feeling of burnout that really defines contemporary society.
This next segment introduces what is probably the most radical truth in the research. That reality isn't fixed.
Yeah.
It is, according to this document, selected by frequency. This moves us beyond basic neurobiology and into the realm of how consciousness actually interacts with the physical world.
The red frequency files explicitly connect this to the quantum observer effect. The argument here is that this isn't just some motivational metaphor, it's a statement about the mechanics of consciousness. Well, if consciousness collapses probability waves into observable outcomes, which is what the famous double slit experiment suggests, then your frequency acts as the observation bias. Your frequency determines which probabilities you collapse into your experience.
So let's analyze manifestation through the lens of our three defined frequency states. If you're in coherence,
You're attuned to a specific stable frequency. You're collapsing aligned probabilities. The observable result of that is an increase in synchronicities, opportunities that seem to appear effortlessly, and a feeling that life is flowing. You're broadcasting a clear, steady signal that attracts resonance.
but if you're in chaos in the gap, you're oscillating wildly between frequency bands. Like we said, those 47 overwrites by 10 a.m.
You are collapsing conflicting probabilities. You're trying to observe two different potential outcomes at the same time. The resulting experience is randomness, volatility, and that feeling that nothing you start can ever gain momentum. You get a fragmented reality because you're broadcasting a fragmented signal.
And finally, when you're in the imposed reality state,
You are locked into someone else's frequency. You are collapsing their probabilities. This is why people trying to manifest from the state just end up experiencing the news cycle's fear or the predicted economic collapse or the existential threat, because that is the dominant, persistent signal they are receiving and holding.
So the core takeaway here is deeply challenging.
Yeah.
It's that the gap is where you lose sovereignty. The feeling that manifestation doesn't work is an illusion.
Exactly. Manifestation always works. People are simply and very effectively manifesting the chaos they are consistently tuned to.
Let's reiterate the measurable physics here, because this really anchors the concept of the overwrite.
Okay. Your heart generates an electromagnetic field that's measurable up to 3 feet away from your body. This is data confirmed repeatedly by the HeartMath Institute. This field interacts directly with the fields of other people. Your brainwaves, which we measure with an EEG, are literal electromagnetic frequencies.
So when a stronger conflicting field, say, the collective fear being broadcast through the media or an intense interpersonal argument enters your environment, what physically happens?
Two processes occur instantly, and both demand energy. First, your internal field tries to maintain homeostasis. It tries to hold its coherence. That's the high energy cost we've been talking about. Second, the stronger external field begins the process of entrainment. It tries to force your system into resonance with its frequency.
Like two tuning forks.
Exactly like two tuning forks. If one is struck powerfully, the other will begin to vibrate at that same frequency.
So the nervous system's choice is stark. You either resist that entrainment, which is exhausting, or you adapt, which means shifting your frequency and submitting to the override.
And the research confirms that the vast majority of people adapt unconsciously, which is why that shift from feeling calm to feeling anxious can feel so instantaneous and out of your control.
We can visualize this with the scenarios the research provided.
Okay, scenario 1. Morning meditation overwritten. You use breath work, you achieve a state of measured coherence. Your HRV is stable at, say, 8.5. Alpha waves are dominant. You're in a generative state.
Then what?
90 seconds after turning on the news radio, which is detailing some catastrophic political failure, your HRV drops to 3.2, and your brain waves shift entirely to high-frequency beta. The emotional charge of the external input has completely overwritten your internal intention.
Okay, scenario 2. Music frequency shift.
You're intentionally listening to specific solfeggio or binaural frequencies, maybe 528 hertz, which is associated with repair. You're feeling expansive and centered. You switch to a mainstream radio station, and within 3 minutes, the song is focused entirely on suffering, abandonment, emotional loss.
And your state changes.
Your measurable emotional state, tracked via galvanic skin response, mirrors the lyrical frequency. Your coherence is replaced by the heartbreak frequency.
And scenario 3. Social contagion. This links directly to polyvagal theory, which we'll get to later.
Right. You enter a conversation in an optimistic state. A coworker then vents to you about their intense personal crisis for 20 minutes, operating from deep sympathetic dysregulation. Data shows that the listener's HRV begins to match the speaker's rigid, low variability baseline.
So the dysregulated nervous system successfully sought regulation through you.
It drained your stability because your system unconsciously tried to stabilize theirs. Co-regulation gone wrong.
Okay, so we've established the problem. This chronic oscillation in the chaos gap. The solution, according to the research, is what it calls the Protocol for Frequency Sovereignty, and is all about disciplined input control.
The philosophy is simple, but it's very demanding. You can't eliminate every single external frequency, but you must become non-reactive to them. This whole protocol is about intentionally building an internal electromagnetic field so powerful and so stable that it resists external entrainment.
The protocol begins with Phase 1, awareness, weeks 1 to 2. And this isn't about trying to feel better yet. It's about collecting objective, ruthless data about yourself.
The document insists on measurable tracking. It says you must use a specific tool, like the HeartMath Inner Balance or a comparable medical-grade HRV monitor. And the core measurement requirement is vital. First, establish your baseline coherence. First thing in the morning, no input, neutral state.
And
Then you measure immediately after consuming news, after being on social media, after specific work interactions. You must document the delta, the objective numerical amount that your coherence dropped.
So this phase demands ruthless identification. You have to pinpoint the specific media platforms, the specific people, the energy vampires, and the environments that crash your HRV the fastest.
And the crucial instruction here is to tolerate the data. No action yet, just observe. You have to map the enemy's attack vectors before you can even begin to plan your defense.
Okay, then Phase 2 is the application of that awareness. Phase 2, elimination, weeks 3 or 4. This requires aggressive input pruning based entirely on the data you just collected in Phase 1.
The concrete steps have to be drastic if you're seeking quick results. Delete the news apps that send push notifications. You don't need real-time emergency doom updates. Unfollow every single social media account that triggers a measurable cortisol spike in your body.
Set hard boundaries.
Set hard boundaries, or, where possible, eliminate the energy vampires who seek co-regulation through you. You have to completely curate and control your auditory and visual environments.
And the source insists on a deliberate replacement strategy. You can't just create a vacuum.
Right. You must replace the consumption of chaotic doom with verified data. Read primary sources, read historical context or research papers instead of the processed news narrative. Replace mindless, reactive scrolling with intentional connection, actual phone calls, face-to-face interaction, engaging with people who hold stable, high frequencies.
And critically, building what the document calls frequency buffers. These are practical, small-step habits that interrupt that overwrite mechanism. Can you give us examples of how these buffers work at a neurological level?
Sure, a 5-minute heart math session before you check your email isn't just a relaxation technique. It's about reactivating your prefrontal cortex and achieving parasympathetic dominance before the input hits.
Okay.
Taking 3 deep, slow breaths before you enter a stressful environment is literally hitting your vagal brake. It ensures the sympathetic response is delayed or mitigated. Using noise-canceling headphones with intentional, coherent sound like 432 hertz or binaural beats during your commute creates an impenetrable sonic barrier. It helps you maintain internal stability despite the external urban frequency chaos. These small, consistent actions are what maintain the integrity of your internal field.
And finally, we move to phase 3, reinforcement, weeks 5 to 8 and beyond. This is about locking in the new reality, making coherence non-negotiable until it becomes your default baseline.
This involves what the document calls daily anchoring routines. Morning. 10 to 15 minutes of dedicated heart math or breath work is non-negotiable. It acts as the primary frequency broadcast for your day. Midday. A 5-minute reset immediately following any known disruption. A deliberate moment to halt the entrainment process in its tracks. And evening. A 10-minute integration to review the day and emotionally release any external frequencies you may have absorbed.
So environmental control has to become absolute. Curating every single input, music, media, conversations, even the aesthetic of your living spaces.
The litmus test must be applied ruthlessly. Does this raise or lower my HRV? If it lowers your coherence, it is eliminated or buffered, period.
And the ultimate goal of this reinforcement phase is what it calls signal amplification.
Right. Once your system is stable, you intentionally begin to broadcast coherence. You spend time with resonant people and in resonant places. You actively create content or have conversations that amplify coherence in the world. The final command of the protocol is to become the stronger field.
Meaning your coherence becomes so stable that it begins to entrain the environment and people around you positively, rather than the other way around.
That's the goal.
So if the protocol for achieving sovereignty is so clear, why do the red frequency files suggest that most people just remain stuck in the gap? The document has a compelling phrase for it. It says the gap, while uncomfortable, represents familiar suffering.
This is a really deep psychological hurdle. The low-grade suffering of constant oscillation, that perpetual anxiety, the low energy, is predictable. It requires no proactive decision-making. It's the known quantity.
And the unknown is terrifying.
The unknown, the commitment to full coherence, is terrifying because it requires change and it requires self-discipline.
The research is clear that crossing that gap, committing fully to coherence, it requires some difficult, almost counterintuitive actions. You have to eliminate these familiar addictive patterns, like the news and scrolling habit.
And you have to tolerate the initial void, the emptiness that comes when you stop consuming the chaos broadcast. It's often mistaken for boredom.
And you have to exert significant metabolic energy to build new neural pathways until coherence becomes your habitual lowest energy state.
That transition period from being dependent on chaos to being disciplined in coherence is often where people fail.
The source lists 3 pretty compelling reasons why most people ultimately choose to just stay in the gap, despite the suffering it causes.
The first is that the gap is predictable. It's the same chaos, different day, which gives the nervous system a false sense of security. The second is that it requires no decision. You're just reacting to the external broadcast. You don't have to define your own reality.
And the third.
And the third, and most powerfully, is that it has social acceptance. Everyone else lives there too. Commiseration and shared misery are very common high-frequency signals inside the gap.
Choosing coherence, then, is a radically sovereign act. And the document addresses the inevitable social consequence of claiming that sovereignty.
Which is that it makes you an anomaly in a world that is committed to chaos.
The research anticipates the projected criticisms that you will face from people who are still embedded in that chaotic state.
They will call you disconnected because you refuse to consume their outrage. They will likely call you privileged because you are no longer in constant fight or flight, which they'll interpret as you lacking empathy for the world's problems. And they will call you naive because you refuse to catastrophize or engage in existential dread.
And the document argues that the sovereign individual has to hold specific counter-affirmations against these criticisms.
Right. You are not disconnected, you are selectively connected. You are not privileged, you are disciplined in your frequency management. And you are not naive. You are intentionally choosing the reality you want to create and manifest rather than succumbing to the one being imposed on you.
To satisfy the deep curiosity of our listener, we really have to anchor this entire model back in the hard science. The core claim of the red frequency files is that this is not belief, it is measurement. It's leveraging established scientific pillars.
The model relies heavily on four major fields of scientific inquiry. I think we need to spend some time detailing these to provide the grounding the learner needs. First, the foundational research from the HeartMath Institute.
We've mentioned their findings on the electromagnetic field of the heart being measurable up to 3 feet away. What other data points cement this as hard science?
The Institute has proven the direct correlation between high HRV, high coherence, and positive health outcomes. Things like improved emotional regulation, superior decision-making, reduced stress hormones, better immune function.
And they've tracked the training.
They have rigorously documented the measurable success of coherence training. Subjects who consistently practice HeartMath techniques show significant, statistically measurable improvements in their HRV and health outcomes within 4 to 8 weeks. This proves that frequency discipline physically changes the body's operating system.
The second pillar is the polyvagal theory, championed by Dr. Stephen Porges. This validates the entire concept of frequency warfare and social contagion.
Polyvagal theory explains the nervous system's sophisticated hierarchy. It confirms we have a vagal brake, the ventral vagal complex, which is responsible for that state of safety, connection, and social engagement, the physiological markers of coherence.
When the brake is active, you can return to baseline quickly.
Right. The theory also validates the concept of co-regulation, the idea that our nervous systems are designed to match the regulation level of those around us. This is why that dysregulated person, the energy vampire, can literally pull your system into their chaos. Your individual vagal tone, which is directly measurable via HRV, dictates your ability to resist that pull and return to baseline.
So the chaos gap isn't just about feeling stressed, it's your body reacting exactly as polyvagal theory predicts it would when the vagal brake is disengaged by constant perceived threat.
Precisely. And this leads us to the third pillar, neuroplasticity research. This explains the long-term cost of remaining in the gap.
We know the brain rewires itself based on input. What does chronic chaos do to the actual brain structure, and how quickly can coherence training reverse it?
Chronic stress, which is the definition of living in the chaos gap, causes profound physical changes. It actually shrinks the hippocampus, which impairs learning, memory, and spatial navigation. And it enlarges the amygdala, making fear and reactivity the dominant mode.
But the brain is always capable of change.
That's what the neuroplasticity research shows. Coherence training, by providing stable, predictable, parasympathetic input, is scientifically shown to reverse this pathological state. It strengthens the PFC and restores the hippocampus, often within that same 8-week period required for coherence lock-in.
And finally, the document circles back to its most abstract pillar, the quantum observer effect, reinforcing that consciousness influences measurement outcomes.
The analogy is simple, but it's profound. The double slit experiment demonstrates that the mere act of observation forces reality to collapse from a wave of probability into a fixed particle. If the smallest components of our reality shift based on how they're observed, then your oscillating consciousness, your chaotic frequency, acts as a profoundly unstable observation bias.
You're trying to observe two separate realities simultaneously.
And that guarantees the outcome will be fragmented and random. Frequency discipline is the act of stabilizing your observation, and therefore stabilizing the manifested outcome.
The research also touches on frequency medicine, noting the physiological implications of sound and vibration.
Indeed. The study of sound healing, binaural beats, specific solfeggio frequencies, it all confirms that vibrational input directly affects measurable brainwave states. The ongoing debate about 432 Hz tuning versus the modern 440 Hz tuning is based on the measurable physiological difference in the body's response to those subtle vibrational variations. The point is this: the idea that frequency affects the body is not conjecture. It's a model built entirely on measurable evidence.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, standing right here, right now. Let's bring it all back to the core takeaways from the red frequency files.
The core concept is that chaos is not your natural state of being. It is static, it is noise, and it is the costly space between two stable broadcast stations where conflicting fragments overlap into massive incoherence. It is the price you pay for trying to manifest one thing while consistently consuming the frequency of its opposite.
And the requirements for sovereignty are defined as simple, but they demand absolute discipline. You must choose your frequency, eliminate the conflicting inputs ruthlessly, hold that frequency steady through daily practice, and then amplify the signal by becoming the stronger field in every interaction.
This framework isn't magic. It's not vague positive thinking.
Yeah.
And it's not spirituality that's disconnected from the body. It is defined in the document as frequency discipline and nervous system sovereignty.
The final choice, then, is about crossing the gap. The research places you in the gap right now, aware of the forces that are at play. You have three paths forward.
1. You can stay in the gap. You can oscillate forever, burn energy endlessly, and manifest only fragments of your desires and fragments of the imposed fear. 2. You can return to the imposed reality, accept the broadcast, stop fighting, and simply numb out to the low, steady frequency of collective anxiety.
Or 3. You cross the gap. You commit fully to coherence. You eliminate your frequency disruptors based on measurable data, and you claim your sovereignty by becoming the stable signal that others must adapt to. The document suggests that most people do the morning meditation, but they fail to eliminate the disruption, and that leaves them in a state of low-grade perpetual suffering.
They are manifesting chaos because they are broadcasting chaos.
The final provocative thought for you to explore is the document's suggested first step, which would encourage you to try immediately: the chaos audit. Tracking your daily frequency shifts. Find a measurable tool, check your baseline, and then track the delta after every specific media consumption, every conversation, every environment change. Because until you objectively measure the delta, you cannot eliminate the disruptor.
Choose your frequency, hold it steady, and observe the reality that collapses into your experience.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you find your true resonant signal.